Thank you. My name is Sunday Michael Ogu. I write for Daily Trust newspaper. Mr. Governor, you talked about a number of things. I would like you to, in the face of what's happening in the US and Europe, address how this continuous rise in interest rate would not have any impact on our banking system, especially if we look at what's happening, like I said, in Europe, how this decelerating growth, as we have seen in Nigeria, would not be impacted by this continuous hike. And my second question would be, would we continue to target the rise in inflation? If we come back for the next meeting and there is an increase, at what point, would we be able to say, here we are comfortable with the number of rises we have seen, so that we don't begin to see a negative impact on the economy with the continuous rises in interest rate? Thank you.
I have said so. I'm not going to give anybody any assurance that we are not going to do what we are doing, because we are seeing the result of what we are doing. We have also seen its impact on impact of NPR hikes on the headline inflation. Okay, yeah, this is the one I was also saying you could target that. This is one talks about credits. Because we have hiked rates, we increased rates aggressively. You could see that we could see some upward and downward pressures on credit, but at least we could see that ultimately that the level of credit has dropped. It could have, at NPR of 18%, credit had dropped to about 600. But at some point, if you look at it around March or April, around May 2022, credit was about 1.4 trillion, right? But as we speak today, credit is about 600, slightly above 600 billion. So which means that the ultimate objective, which is to say when you raise rates, you are trying to constrain credit, will say, yes, we are seeing it happen. And I must confess here that we are not happy that this rate, the hiking rate is constraining credit, but we have to do our work because inflation is at the heart of what we are saying we want to deal with at this time. Because if you don't raise rates in order to constrain credit, what that will mean is that it will create more inflationary pressures and create more problem for us. And it also goes to address the issue, one of the questions that was raised about growth. It has impact on growth, no doubt. But we still feel that at 22.22%, growth is being impacted. And that we're not saying that we are removing our eyes from growth. We're not saying that, because one of the questions talked about whether we're going to be now, Nancy was saying it says, we had announced before that there's going to be a gradual exit from quasi-fiscal functions. What we said is that there will be a reduction in the level of aggression in our quasi-fiscal. We're not just going to go from say on a scale of 0 to 10, from 10 to 0, because you could see that even in the course of this communique, I did read some of the interventions that were granted in billions of naira to some very, very priority sectors of the economy. That it will not be as aggressive as we have been, because at this time, inflation is taming inflation through raising rates is what is at the heart of what we are addressing at our meetings. And it is a global phenomenon. In fact, your monetary policy decisions will be seen to be not in line or not in tandem with macroeconomic policy decision-making process if at a time when you are seeing an aggressive rise in inflation rate, what you are doing is an easing policy. It can't work. So that's why we believe, at least we've tried as much as possible to convince ourselves that the decisions we have taken in the last 1 year by aggressively raising rates, it's yielding results. There's a lag factor involved, but we believe that ultimately that we'll get to a point where we'll begin to see in absolute numbers the inflation rate beginning